Great. We'll fill it in along the way. I'm getting ready to pop up the PowerPoint. And then for you here, I'll help us as we fill in the blanks. But we are in chapter 17. Now, I will tell you to be prepared. I want to make sure that we, obviously, as every week, I always want to make sure that we don't rush through, but also not just linger for the sake of lingering. But I will probably linger more in this chapter and next chapter, probably more than usual. So we may not get through chapter 17 tonight, just to prepare you, because there is a lot that is in this chapter. And I want to do my best to help you to understand what Revelation 17 is all about. If anybody needs a Bible, Micah, could you grab, there should be some of those, should up there on the top there, on the top left. Yeah, some Bibles there, or you can use your device or whatever you you want to use. But as we approach chapter 17, so let me go ahead and share my screen. And there we go. Yeah, so anybody that's, Katie, would you like one? Yeah, there you go. You're welcome. And all right, ta-da. So this particular chapter, first of all, from the sake of kind of where we are on our graphic here, I'm sorry, you guys can't see this, but you've seen it before. We are in these final judgments, all right? So in other words, if you remember, just for holistic view again, we had the seal judgments, then we had the trumpet judgments, and then now we're in these final, if you will, as far as descriptive, these bowls or vials. And again, the best way to try to understand this is to think about the seal judgments, that they are all kind of encompassed into it. It's kind of the macro view of all of the judgments, but not quite all of it, because it does encompass the others, a majority of them. Then within that, so if you think like a telescope, then it kind of opening up, and then you've got these trumpet judgments. And then within the trumpet judgments, you were getting even more and more detail. Then we have the seal or the vial or the bowl judgments. And they're more detailed, and they're also somewhat chronological. But there's some places along the way that we've come, they're kind of parentheses. They're kind of it's kind of like a pause. And then with that pause, hey, Paul, with this pause, almost said with the pause, but the pause, there is within these things, it gives even a little bit more details and so forth along that. So on our graphic here, we're in these 7 bowls or vials. And then tonight, we're looking at, in chapter 17, the harlot and the beast. We're going to talk about, and I've described this in chapter 17, the destruction of religious Babylon, and you'll understand where we are when we get there. So first of all, for sake of introduction, and this, I've put a portion of this on your handout, which, by the way, I cannot see you guys, so speak up if you have a question or something like that. Revelation 17 and 18 are 2 of the most, and this is opinion, obviously, intriguing chapters of the Bible, because there's a lot of discussion around really, what does this mean? What does it represent? As you guys know, we believe in a futuristic approach to the book of Revelation. We believe all this stuff will take place in the future. Yet 2 of the most difficult, and it's very disputed about a lot of these things that we're going to discuss tonight and next week and so forth. Both of these chapters deal with the subject of Babylon, and it form a unit of prophetic doctrine. Babylon, when we think Babylon, we think Old Testament, we think old days. I mean, we know there's kind of a modern day Babylon, if you will, that supposedly started construction about this literal place. But it doesn't exist today other than just kind of on a map, if you will. But it's going to come back again. And we're going to discuss tonight, really based on chapter 17. We've heard it before, where and when, and what does that look like, and all these various different type things. But it forms a unit of prophetic doctrine, namely the destruction of Babylon. However, these are two of the most difficult chapters of Revelation to interpret. And obviously, expositors and people that know a lot more than I do vary widely in their understanding of this section of the book. I will be presenting it in a way based on my personal studies of gleaning things from many, many different people and so forth in a futuristic view, what I believe, but really, quite frankly, I cannot be dogmatic on it. I believe that it aligns, though, with many others, but none of us really, quite frankly, could say this is it. We do the best that we can. But I believe that hopefully by the end of tonight and next week or whatever, that you'll agree with me. No, I'm kidding. That you'll do your homework, right? In other words, be a Berean and search through the scriptures and so forth. So, two different aspects of Babylon are contemplated in these chapters. Two separate aspects of Babylon and her fall. Chapter 17 describes Babylon in its mystery form. We'll see that tonight. I'm gonna mute some of you guys because it's getting a little noisy there in the background. Hold, please. All right. There we go. Chapter 17 describes Babylon in its mystery form as a religious system or spirit of false worship. So keep that in mind. Chapter 18 describes Babylon as a political and a commercial system embodied in a city, possibly, the city of Babylon of the future. There's a lot of discussion about, will there literally be a redoing also of the actual city itself? I believe probably. So we have two Babylons, the religious Babylon and the political Babylon. All right. And so systemically, we need to keep that in mind as we go through this. So chapter 17 and 18 are an amplification is the word I want to use, of the main features of the tribulation, the place, the function, and the final judgment of Babylon. Chapter 17, again, I'm still kind of in the intro, which deals with the destruction of the religious Babylon, would have to occur when we think, where in the tribulation is this going to take place? It's going to take place somewhere around the middle of the tribulation. It will have to take place after the Antichrist performs goes into the temple and the abomination of desolation. All right, so it's going to have to happen after that. And so the beast is finished. What we're going to see is the beast is going to be finished using the religious Babylon to come to power. So here's where I want our heads to be. If you remember, we've looked at these two beasts that come out. One comes out of the sea, one comes out of the earth. The first beast is the description of the Antichrist himself, the beast. Ultimately, the beast is Satan. But this person that comes on the scene during the tribulation, then there's the second beast that comes out of the land, the earth, it says, that is going to be, who remembers who that's going to be? The false prophet. So we have this unholy trinity, all right? So we have Satan, we have the Antichrist, and then we have the false prophet. Just like God, the Godhead has Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. If you remember, the false prophet is going to act like the Holy Spirit. In other words, one of the main roles of the Holy Spirit is to point people to Christ. In other words, that is his role. He is the one who convicts of sin. He is the one who helps us and strengthens us. And his main role in salvation is to point people to Christ. Well, the false prophet's going to do the same thing. If you remember back earlier in chapter 15 and 16, we saw that. We saw where the false prophet will get people to worship the beast. And so, but the beast is evil. In other words, the beast himself, this first beast, the Antichrist, is incredibly evil. So he's going to be using all of this for his own edification, his own power. And so when he's done with the false prophet and gets to the place to where he wants to be, he's going to get rid of him. All right. Did you just make a raspberry noise? All right. So Paul just went, right? So he's out of there, right? He's going to get him. He's going to get him out of there. We're going to see this in chapter 17. All right. Chapter 18 deals with the destruction of the political or the economic or commercial Babylon as it's embodied in the city of Babylon, perhaps, the headquarters. So here's how I want us to think of this. So during the tribulation, when the church is gone, we'll be raptured out of here. There's going to be pure, utter chaos. We've seen, and here's kind of a quick overview of where we've come so far in Revelation. You can imagine how chaotic it's going to be. What happened to all these people? Destruction, all these various different type things. We've already seen the hand of God in the first half of the tribulation, let alone how it gets worse in the second half. And this person who's going to come on this white horse singing peace and all these different type of things is going to be false. Oh, there'll be a level of peace. He's going to set up. He's going to sign a 7-year treaty. He's going to allow the temple in Jerusalem to be rebuilt so that the Jewish people can worship. And he's going to kind of be this hero of all the world, but he's just evil because he ultimately wants to get people to worship himself. The Bible teaches this.
Oh, I have it.
So what's happening is that all of this stuff, you've got him, and then you have this false prophet, and there's going to be this political system, a worldwide political system that the Antichrist is going to rule and be kind of the head of. And at first he's going to be just this smooth talker. Everybody's going to love him. The Bible describes him very much in detail on he's going to be very charismatic, and all these people were going to say, wow, here's our savior. There's chaos in the world. Man, this is the guy. And he's going to get wounded to the head, we saw. And then the false prophet is going to be a religious system that's going to be set up, very ecumenical. It's probably going to be a mix of all that's, a Laodicean type of church, lukewarm within Christianity, but it's going to include a mixture of Islam and all the various different types of things. It's going to be this worldwide religious system, and he's going to point people to worshiping the beast. All of that stuff's going to be happening. So in chapter 17, we're going to see this destruction now of the false prophet, the religious system. Chapter 18 then is going to be the destruction of the geopolitical system. So I'm reiterating that over and over again because you can see Babylon, 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 and I'm babbling because it's Babylon. It's good to babble when you babble Babylon. So what's happening is that it can get confusing. That's why I want to kind of take our way through this. So chapter 18 describes the destruction of this political system. So some examples of the false religion influences. So why would God use in his word Babylon? Why would he use the verbiage Babylon? Why would he say this is Babylon? Not only a literal Babylon, but its system worldwide. We know, which by the way, Babylon originated, if you will, of course, at the Tower of Babel. All right. And so it all started there. Nimrod, and all of that happens. And so when you go back and historically talk about this, it was more than just building a tower and trying to reach the heavens and God had told them to go into the earth, and they all stayed in one place. That's why God confused their languages, all these different type of things. But there was also a religious system that started, and all the way to this day, there's an influence of Babylonianism, if that's a word. Here are some of the things when you go back and study historically the influences. Now, stay with me, because these Babylonian influences are going to come to rise again at an even heightened level during the tribulation. First of all, out of that system comes the worship of the mother and child. When you go all the way back, you will see this whole idea of a mother and a child and worshiping that. You should automatically start having your little alarm bells going off on some things that sounds familiar. The doctrine of purgatory comes out of that. In other words, there's a holding tank and people can pray you out to get good with God. All right? The doctrine of extreme unction, in other words, last rites for the dying, came out of Babylonianism. Things like festivals, when you go all the way back, Yule Day, Easter, the Nativity of John the Baptist, the Feast of Assumption, the sign of the cross. With Constantine, what actually happened was the name Christianity, though, was given to pagan Babylonian mystery religion, but with some necessary changes to make it more Christian. But it really wasn't. All right. Now, I want to stop here just briefly. We celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and we call it Easter. It comes from the word Ishtar, right? Is where it comes from. I don't even want to go down that road about whether or not we call it Resurrection Sunday around here, all right? But we don't have it the same look and feel on where it came out of, all right? So, we celebrate the resurrection. But what happened is that just the name, that's kind of where it came from. That's a whole, we'll be on there for hours, and I don't have time, and you don't either, all right? The temples became the churches. The priests and the nuns became the leaders of Christianity. The statues and festivals were given new names, but it was the same system with a new name. Now, we all have Catholic friends and people that we love, all right? You would never hear this pastor say that everybody who's Catholic is going to hell. That is between them and the Lord. But the system is pagan, all right? It's all about works-based. It's all of these type of things. And really, quite frankly, we're going to look at that. That's why there's something that some believe that a Pope type person would become the false prophet. It would be somebody who has worldwide recognition. Even today, we see this new Pope who is very, very different from any Pope who's ever lived. All right. So even the staunch Catholics are going, I don't know what this dude's doing. All right. So my point is that none of us can be dogmatic, but it could be someone like him. All right. But that's why you hear a lot of us that believe the Bible and all of its things. We get a bad rap because they go, well, you're bad mouthing all the Catholics. Well, it's a false system. Not all the people, some of them, anyway, but it's a false system. It's pagan. All right. So I share that with you because all of that came out of Babylon. All of that whole system. As a matter of fact, the Masonic Lodge has its roots in Babylonianism. And I have a lot of friends. My dad was a Mason. And I'm not saying everybody's Mason it's changed through the years. It has a lot of good things, and most of them are Christian today. But I'm saying a lot of the stuff comes from that. And so just like we still worship on Easter and so forth like that, I don't want to say that everybody who's a Masonic lodge is all of that, because there's a lot of good and all that. But I'm saying that's kind of where it started. You start trailing the dots. Well, what's going to happen is that during the tribulation, there's going to be a conglomeration of all of this that's going to come together that the world will buy into. All right?
Right.
So that's just the intro.
Mhm.
Now we're going to look at, on your fill in the blank, the description of the religious Babylon. The description of the religious Babylon in chapter 17, verses 1 through the first part of verse 6, 6a. Let me read these, and then we'll come back and look at them as people would say up north, voice by voice. All right. Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, stop there just a moment. Remember, chapter 16 was where we have these bowls that are doing, and there was these seven angels. So the one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, John, the Revelator, come and I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute. Now your King James version says whore, right? So what? Right? He says, I'll call you to show the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk. And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, and that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written the name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and the blood of the martyrs. Okay, so you read that and you go, what in the world? Some of this stuff sounds familiar and some of it doesn't, and it's got the 7 heads, and we've seen all these different type of things. So let me walk through this, and hopefully I can help us to see that why a lot of people that I'm aligned with think this is more of a description of a religious system. All right. Verse 1, John is called to come and see the judgment of Babylon, but in the process, he also gets a description of this woman, describing woman being Babylon. The subject of this section is the judgment of, as I've already said, the religious Babylon. The judgment describes her condemnation, sentence, and penalty passed. The emphasis is the particular character and nature of the penalty that God has in store for Babylon. Now it says, call her the great prostitute or the great harlot, refers to the spiritual prostitution and fornication that categorizes the apostate church of the tribulation. It's this apostate church that's going to, this falling away, if you will, from the true church. All right, because we're going to be gone. All right. You'll notice the word great, right? And this great refers to the harlot system, which will reach its top after the removal of the real church, after we're gone, by way of the rapture. The prostitute, really, it's pieces of it exist today in kind of different forms. You think about an apostate church. Well, Roman Catholicism. You have, Paul had mentioned Chrislam. You have today where people are mixing Christianity and Islam together so that we can live more in harmony. Oh, we all serve one God, right? But it's just mixing in all these different type things. We have the cults, that are out there, those that deny the deity of Christ. We have liberalism like crazy within mainstream denominations that are turning away from the truth. So the point is, the world's going to be ready. The world will be ready. Plus you have Islam, and you have which is one of the fastest growing religions that are out there in the world. But by default, I mean, if somebody's holding a knife to your throat, you know, you're going to convert in some form or another in those, yeah. Yeah. So once the church, the true church is gone and out of the way, it's going to be chaos, but people will buy into. How many here has ever seen one of those stickers that says coexist? And it's got all the different religious symbols. I mean, you know, I get what they're saying. We're forced to coexist. We all exist together. But the implication is that it's all truth. And no, it's not. You can only have one truth, right? On earth, right? So think about this. It won't be long. We're already seeing bits and pieces of it where people will be ready not only for a political leader to kind of get the world out of a mess, but they're going to want, you know, the biggest thorn in the flesh of the world right now is true Christianity. People don't want to hear truth. And so it's like this whole idea of, well, there's many ways to get to God. No, there's only one way to get to God. Is that narrow-minded? How many here say yes? It's very narrow-minded, right? Of course, that's why Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father except through me. That's pretty narrow-minded. So once we're gone, all right, all these various type of religions will come together in some form or fashion. So the world will be ready. And it says that she sits on many waters, referring to worldwide unification and control. Waters refers to the nations and the many people of those nations, which we'll see in just a moment. So that's verse 1. Verse 2, it says, with whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on earth have become drunk. It's a reference to the leaders of nations in which the religious system has a reach. This is going to be truly an alliance of church and state. They're going to work together because you're going to have the false prophet, you're going to have the Antichrist that are going to kind of be working together, and then that'll bring the nations in all of this. It says that they've been made drunk with the wine of her immorality. The wine refers to the demonic doctrines, the ideologies and concepts produced by this alliance. You know, in ancient Babylon, it involved the mysteries of the mother-child cult and the one world order of Nimrod. Again, I know Brother Ted, he loves history. He could probably go back and share just a lot of depth on this stuff. And later, of course, it became this world religion of Nebuchadnezzar. What did Nebuchadnezzar do? He had to build this big old huge statue and said, worship it. All right. That's all, you know, he was a Babylonian. In our day, there's a worship of the Queen of Heaven is still present right here in Orlando, right off of I-4. There is a big, huge church, put that in air quotes, that says the Queen of Heaven Catholic Church.
Yeah. Next to SeaWorld.
Yeah, it's near SeaWorld. I heard somebody say that, right?
But they believe that Mary was taken into heaven just like Jesus, and that she is in heaven with him. So that's the reason why they say she's the Queen of Heaven. Exactly. So because my sister-in-law is a Catholic, so she could tell you all about that. But
oh yeah,
that's the reason why they believe that she was taken. She didn't. That's why they say there's no grave of hers. That she was taken into heaven, just like Jesus ascended into heaven.
Yeah, and it's not in the Bible, so therefore it comes out of the book of Isaiah, right? So it's not biblical.
I'm the only way.
Pastor Dwayne?
Yes.
The archaeology they find in Ephesus, the grave with John the Apostle and Mary's over there. These two graves over there. John the Apostle,
yes,
and Mary. Because you remember, after his death, he delivered Mary to the John's attention. Because she was younger, and we don't know the reason. But they find some graves in Ephesus, today Turkey. One
Thank
is John. There's a big church, the giant one, the
Mhm.
John the Apostle, which is in ruins now. And plus the Mary, he was buried over there. This is what they say.
Yeah.
They say.
But thank you. And that would make sense, right? Because Jesus told John and said, you know, behold your mother, mother, behold your son. John took them into her care that they would be buried together. Bottom line is we know she died and we know that she's buried somewhere. All right. And possibly there in Ephesus. So thank you, brother. Then the one world order through social reform, we have, you know, New Age that's all kind of mixed into this whole mysticism and so forth, that a lot of this encompasses. All this is Babylonianism,
Uh-huh.
and it's going to rise its head.
It's the
Uh,
last defeat of the
I'm sorry?
statue.
I'm sorry, do what?
I said that it's the statue of Nebuchadnezzar's. It's the feet and the clay. One is iron and one is clay, and they
Oh,
mix
brother.
together.
You are way ahead of me, but you're right. yeah, yes, you're absolutely right. So stay tuned, all right? So David brings up exactly what we're going to cover. So, and so, you know, and again, it's like this whole idea of many different things that you know, you can be like God. And so we see all this mix of things. That's New Age is pretty much that. You can become a God. I mean, when you if basically the Mormons believe that you will become a god, that you will become a god of your own world and have all these spiritual babies, and you know, again, I love my Mormon friends and stuff, but they are not Christian. It's not Christianity. There's enough truth in it, but there's, whenever you have a little, it's like I preached on this past week, if you have just a little bit of leaven, it becomes a lie. So blah, blah, blah. You guys know that. I'm preaching to the choir, or I'm preaching to the choir. All right. So, drunkenness in any form, you know, obviously I don't want to meander that. I've got a lot of notes on this, but basically they're going to be drunk with that. Now let's look at verse 3. It says, and he carried me away in the spirit. So here he is, John's being moved around in the spirit again. All right. Into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The scarlet beast is the Antichrist. All right. So this religious system is going to be riding on that. He's scarlet because of his bloodthirsty, and it will, at the right time, he's going to kill the women. He's going to kill this religious system, because he's going to get what he needs from her, and he's going to say, I no longer need you. You're not going to worship all this other stuff. You're going to worship me. We saw that in Revelation 13. He's filled with the names of blasphemy, which refers to his anti-God character and to the blasphemous claims that he's going to make later. If someone would please turn to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4. And once you get there, if you would read that nice and loud for all of us. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4. Got it, Paul? No.
I thought I heard.
Oh, all right. Does anybody here have it? All right.
Say it again.
2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4.
Who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God.
Thank you. That's speaking of the Antichrist, right? That's what he will do. Verse 4, it says, the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. Now, again, if we're talking about a religious system, which I believe we are, and many others, look at all these things. It says the woman is described as clothed in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, precious stones and pearls. Purple and scarlet have for centuries been the colors of royalty and of the wealthy. In part, they also stand for her political power. In part, they point to her extra religious appearances. The gold, the precious stones, and pearls refer to her immense wealth. These colors have for centuries been the colors of the Roman Catholic Church, which is why there's a lot that believe that there will be something that, because it's going to be the rise of a new Roman Empire, all right? So it's possible. So you think about, when you think about the popes and you think about the bishops and everything that they're full of all this stuff, lots of gold and purple and red and all of these different type things. And the wealth of the Roman Catholic Church is incredibly immense. You guys probably knew this, so forgive me if for just doing it, but do you realize the Vatican is a nation? Yep. The Vatican is a nation in itself. It is autonomous, and it rules the world from the religious system. But
Sir, if we step back, do you think the 7 heads could be the G7?
Hold that thought.
Okay.
All right. So yes, you guys see the wheels are turning, right? Everybody's going, hey, this kind of sounds familiar. Now remember, this is going to be a mix of all the religions, but it's going to have some type of initial influence. And some even say possibly even Islam. Who knows? All right. It says that having a golden cup refers to her enticing manner of alluring men and nations, and she invites men to drink of her deadly wine by offering it in a golden cup while he reigned in all of his splendor. So the imagery here is basically, it's going to be attractive. It's going to be attractive. People are going to want to be part of this religious system. Let's look in verse 5. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery: Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. The practice, now here's a little bit of the background. The practice of harlots in ancient times was to write their names on their foreheads for easy recognition, which showed the shamelessness of their character, you know? So there's this connection there of the harlots of John's day in the imagery that's given here and what they actually did in practice during that time. And it reveals a seared conscience from continual rejection of God's truth. It says, you notice the word mystery. It's not part of the name, but it's a description of the name. It's a secret. Initiation into the mysteries of the cult will always be part of Babylonianism, and it links this harlot with the ancient system. And it's going to be like that. It says Babylon the Great. It's telling us that Babylon the Great refers not only to the city possibly of chapter 18, but a religious system. So it will be great. I'm hearing a dong dong. Is that you? There we go. And then it says, and I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints. Is a reference to the martyrdom that's going to take place. If you remember, there's going to be people who truly come to Christ. They're going to get saved. And so the true Christians are going to oppose all of this. And there's going to be the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, not only during the tribulation, but again, this is why a lot of people believe that this is possibly some type of Roman Catholicism influences, because through the history, the great crusades and stuff that happened was killing a lot of the real true Christians. So again, can't be dogmatic, but it's possible. But we do know that during the tribulation, there's going to be a lot of martyrs that are going to take place, and it will be the believers, the people that get saved during the tribulation. In chapter 17, verse 6b through 14, on your next fill in the blank, is the description of the beast. First of all, the next fill in the blank for 6b is John's wonderment. I like that word, wonderment, and interest. His wonderment and interest. Let's look here at the second part of verse 6. It says, when I saw her, I marveled greatly. It comes from the Greek word to literally means to be amazed or surprised, to wonder at something with attentive interest. So John is seeing this and he's going, what is this? Then the next fill in the blank is the answer and promise of the angel in verse 7. It says, but the angel said to me, why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. In other words, he's basically, the angel's going like, why are you standing there gawking? I'm going to help you out here. So the angel promises to tell John about this mystery concerning this woman and the beast. The woman now representing the religious system, the beast representing the political system. The next fill in the blank is the description in verses 8 through 14. Let's first of all here look at this beast that's described in Revelation 13. Actually, 7 things are stated about this beast beginning in verse 8. So it says, the beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction, and the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. All right, what in the world does that mean? All right, well, we know that this is describing the beast, the Antichrist political system in terms of the past, the present, and the future. That's why it says that was not, and then is. This beast is the personification of imperial power. Was refers to old Rome. All right? Old Rome existed, right? Historically, we know that it existed. Then there is, that existed during John's day, and that is her past. And then it says is not. So if you notice there, it says it was and is not. Well, what does that mean?
There's a time period when it wasn't.
Right. Is it a world empire right now? No. So in other words, Rome was overthrown. All right. Rome was eventually overthrown, and that's why it is not, and it refers to the fall of Rome. And then so from John's standpoint and ours, Rome would fall and pass from the scene. This is her present condition. And then it says, look here again, it says, the beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. In other words, that's why there's this talk about the rise of a Roman type of empire again during the tribulation. So in the final days, especially in the days of the tribulation, all through that, this is her future. And it says the future form is related to the abyss that comes out, and it has a demonic source. So Satan himself is going to be behind it and kind of rise all this up. Now, in a moment, we're going to go back and we're going to look again at Daniel. All right, somebody had mentioned about Daniel and the 7 and the toes and blah, 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 blah. We're going to take a look at that, but stay with me in just a moment. Then we're told in verse 9, it says, this calls for a mind with wisdom. Okay. We pause there because there's a little colon. And it says the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. It says the 7 heads of the beast are mountains, which, as we saw in chapter 13, refers to 7 successive world kingdoms represented by 7 former kings, all of who support the religious system of the harlot. Now, there are, through world history, when you go all the way back, you will see all these various different type of kingdoms. The reference is that it's going to be a conglomerate of all of these various world empires that are going to come together. And then it says that of these 7 mountains. Now, here's a couple things. We know that Rome is considered the city of 7 hills. That's why there's possibly that thought process. Possibly the 7 continents. I think that's a real possibility because there's 7 continents. And so this worldwide thing is going to be, there's going to be heads of all of these continents all over the world. And it says, it tells us, it says, here's the mind of the wisdom. In other words, perhaps it's a warning, all right, to be prepared when you see this thing. So those that would be reading the word of God during the tribulation may get this. Only those who know this truth and accept it will be prepared to recognize and stand against the deception of all of this. That's why we study prophecy. We can warn people. I mean, would we all agree, bless you, would we all agree that we definitely see pieces of this already coming into play to set up? I mean, it's there. Some people would look at it and go, well, it's just history. It's just what's happening. No. There is nothing that's come together more, this convergence of all of these pieces that are spoken about prophetically for the future like there is today. It's unbelievable. And so it's crazy to even thinking about it. Now look here in verse 10. It says, well, let me go back to 9. This calls for mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. So this religion system will be encompassing these 7 mountains. And it says they are also 7 kings. All right, so this is why I want to slowly go through this, all right? Because if we skim across it, we'll all get confused. It says they are also 7 kings. So these 7 mountains, there will be kings, rulers of each one of these things. And then it says 5 of whom have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. So, as mentioned previously, this refers to the past history of the very first one, the very first empire that really had in history was Egypt. After Egypt, you had Assyria, then you have Babylon, then you have Medo-Persia, and then we have Greece. And then 1 is, so those are the 5 that have fallen, world empires. 1 is refers to who? Rome. So when John wrote this, there's that 6th one. All right. And then it says the other is yet to come. Well, this refers to this revived Roman Empire, because when we go back to Daniel, it says that it's going to be different than any of all the other empires that come. This future one will encompass pieces of all these others, but it will be different than all the other world empires. That's why the one that's yet to come. And it'll be a 10-nation confederation, the 10 toes, of the first half of the tribulation, and will truly be the work of the devil. Think about this. During the first half, these 10 nations will come together, this confederation. That's why when the EU came together initially, everybody was like, this is it, this is it. Well, I don't blame them, because, I mean, you look at it and you think, especially when it got to 10, everybody had their rapture shoes on, they're ready to go. But it's way past that now, right? Now, but here's something to think about. You have people pulling out of the EU. Maybe it will go back to 10 again. Who knows, right? The seventh kingdom will continue only for a little while, specifically for 3.5 years, the first half of the tribulation. So I'm gonna let you noodle that just a little bit to think about that. So if we go back, it says they are also 7 kings. So the rulers of these kingdoms, 5 who have already fallen, all those world empires prior to Rome. 1 is Rome when John wrote this, and the other has not yet come. And when he does, all right, he must remain only a little while. Let's look at verse 11. Is your mind exploding yet, guys? As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes into destruction. What? Right? All right. So let me do the best that I can. Lori always laughs at me because this is like about the 4th or 5th time she sat in with me teaching Revelation. And I always go back to my old notes and stuff that I've just gathered through the years of studying. And I change up little things that try to make it as clear as I possibly can. But nothing's changed from the standpoint because all this stuff is still happening. It's unbelievable. Verse 11 informs us that this beast that which was and is not and would come again actually becomes an 8th kingdom. All right, so the second half of the tribulation is going to be an even different thing that starts off in the first half. He is one of the 7 and will go into destruction. Here's what it possibly could mean. The revived Roman Empire will take on the form of an imperial dictatorship, and by this change actually become an 8th kingdom. All right? A whole new and vicious form of government, and the blasphemous form that we see back in Revelation 13. I encourage you to go back and read Daniel 2. I encourage you to go back and read Daniel 9 and Daniel 7. All of this is prophetically speaking of these things. And this, and by the way, if you remember when we started all this, Daniel chapter 9 really describes this final week. You have the 70 weeks of Daniel, the 69 have already taken place. The 70th week is that 7 years that takes place. This occurs in the last half of the tribulation, and it lasts for the second 3.5 years. But guess what's going to happen? He's going to get destroyed. So when you go back and look at the image that Nebuchadnezzar, my pal Nebi, which I believe he got saved. I believe we'll see Nebi in heaven. All right. When he had that dream and Daniel describes this to him at the very end, the stone that comes out of the mountain, which is representative of Jesus, comes and destroys, smashes it all. All right. It'll be done. All right. We're going to see that in Revelation 19. All right. We're going to go all the way down to verse 14, and then we'll end tonight. Let's look at verse 12. It says, and the 10 horns, we've seen and talked about that before. This is where it starts to culminate, come together. And the 10 horns, verse 12, that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received, who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour together with the beast. The 10 horns become this 10-nation confederation of nations. Horns, as you said, always in Bible, always represent strength and leaders. Always. Well, I mean, when it describes people and things like that, I mean, there's ram horns where they blow and all that. Which, by the way, here's my shofar. David's
Blow
got
it.
David's got a bigger shofar than mine, but I still.
No, go ahead, blow it.
All right.
There you go.
All right. So,
What did you say that the horns always represent?
well, yeah, with the exception of one that's specifically defined, it always represents power, strength, and leaders. All right. And so these horns become this 10-nation confederation of nations that will join together under 10 kings. These are nations which were once part of the old Roman Empire. So if you go back and look at history and look at all these nations that were part of the eventual all Roman Empire, you can get a pretty good idea of what this would encompass. All right. Sometime before the tribulation, these European nations will begin seeking a way to confederate for some type of political, military, and commercial reasons. Most likely, again, it's speculation, but it's an educated guess, because we think about how the world's going to be when we're gone. The pressure from the king of the north, which we'll talk about, and partly because of the worldwide conspiracy that's led by Satan in preparation for his end-time bid to be worshipped by man to control the world. Ultimately, this is where it's going to culminate. It's ultimately to where the Antichrist does not only want to be worshipped, he wants to rule the world. At the first half of the tribulation, he's going to be seen as a hero. People are going to love this guy. When he comes into the temple and claims himself to be God, the Bible says he literally is indwelt by Satan. He has demonic influence prior, but at that point, he literally is possessed by Satan himself. There's a difference between demonic possession and Satan himself indwelling. Satan himself will indwell that. And so he's going to want, just like Satan has always wanted to be God. You go back and you read where it says, I will be like the Most High. That's why God threw him out of heaven. All right. So these 10 nations will come together. They'll form this nucleus in the end time kingdom. In prophecy, we sometimes have difficulty distinguishing between a kingdom and governmental system and a king. One verse will speak of the kingdom and the very next verse switches to the king. That's the kind of the case here. So it speaks of a person, but it also speaks of a system. The beast is sometimes the empire, and sometimes it's going to be this Satan-controlled man. So when you read it again, you got to kind of keep that in mind. It says, and who has not yet received. In other words, this all future will occur with the tribulation. Let's look here again in verse 12. It says, and the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour. That basically just means for a short period of time, together with the beast. So they're all going to be together at first. They receive authority with the beast, who eventually he's going to rise up out of this conglomeration. Write this down. Daniel chapter 7, verse 23 and 24. Daniel chapter 7, verse 23 and 24. All right, we're almost done for tonight. Verse 13.
You had that on there, 24.
These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to who? To the beast. All right? That just sounds like Beauty and the Beast. There's a section that goes, to the beast, right? Kill the beast, that's it. Kill the beast. All right, so what's eventually going to happen is that they're eventually going to just say, wow, this guy's extra special. He's got skills that we never do, and they will hand over their power eventually to him, but they're going to see that he is literally a wolf in sheep's clothing. He is the one that's called the white horse rider of Revelation 6, because he's going to come as peace. They're going to give him their authority, and power, thinking he can solve the world's problems, provide a leadership which the world needs against the threat of the king of the north, his allies, the kings of the east, the Orient, and also solve the Arab-Israeli dispute. I mean, that's been in there the whole time. So this is unbelievable. We see all of these things. Think about this right now. We talked about this last week. If there's one thing that can draw this world together right now, would be this whole COVID thing, right? And vaccination for the entire world. And I don't know if you guys know this. If you have an iPhone, and it's also on your Androids. Just a little thing. If you go to your settings and if you click on your privacy, and then if you click on health, you'll see a little thing there. It's a COVID-19 exposure logging app that was loaded onto your system that nobody told you about. Now, oh, Brother Dwayne, come on, man, Mr. Conspiracy. I'm just saying this is the kind of stuff that's happening behind the scenes that's already getting set for a worldwide system. And think about this. If you have a tracking system, whether it's this or not, don't misread me. I'm just saying this is how easy this could go. People will buy into it. You will not be able to buy or sell without some type of mark system, something like that. People go, well, if you refuse to let people know whether you have COVID or not, and I'll use that as an example, we're not going to let you in or be vaccinated. All right? It's like we go, it's almost surreal. It's almost surreal for us to be able to do that. Okay, let me go on. Verse 14. Lastly, and we'll end here tonight. Let me make a little mark on my notes. It says, they will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. We're told that this wage war with the Lamb, but we know that the Lamb is going to overcome them as the King of kings and Lord of lords. When we get to chapter 19, that's where we're going to see all this culminate, because they're all going to be coming against each other, but then they're going to come against Jesus coming in the clouds that's going to eventually take care of all of this. So think about this. I mean, we think about this and we believe this by faith. So if all the other stuff that we already see is culminating, that has so much truth in it, the reality of it, that 10, 15, 20 years ago would have even seemed surreal. Stuff that when I was teaching this a long time ago, I would say it's coming. A lot of this is here now. It's here. Praise God. Can y'all say glory?
Glory.
All right. So we're going to end there tonight. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I want to see your beautiful faces. There you are. Well, some of you have darkened your faces, but this is a lot of information, folks. And as I've said from the very beginning, I do not have all the answers. I mean, clearly, and I depend on others as I study, do the best. None of us really have complete handle on all of this stuff. We do the best that we can, but it just makes sense, right? And so it's just neat to see how it's all culminating and coming together. It does not scare me. It shouldn't scare you. It should excite us. Before we end tonight, I want us to go all the way back. If you will, please turn in your Bibles to Revelation chapter 1. Revelation chapter 1. And allow me just to read the first few verses again, just to remind us. The revelation, or the unveiling, is literally what that means, word of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show to his servants the things that which must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who bore witness, I'm in verse 2, the word of God, and the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw. Here's my favorite part. This is why we don't need to be afraid. Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written in it, for the time is near. Blessed, happy is what that means. We shouldn't be afraid of Revelation. We're crying out loud. I cannot believe how many preachers of the gospel of Jesus Christ will stay away from this book because it's just, that's nuts. It's unbiblical. You know? Anyway, I'm preaching to the choir. Well, let's close in prayer. I love you all, and I thank you for who you are. I thank you for your prayers. I thank you for your encouragement.